Welcome to the Mini Book Podcast, African American Books Edition.
Today we are focusing on the battle for the black mind, how education became the front line of the fight for black liberation by Kerida L. Brown.
We thank you for listening, and please consider subscribing for future content.
We should also state up front that the voices you are hearing come from AI, but the content comes straight from the book.
Right.
We feel that this is a great way to learn about African American history.
Absolutely. And once you hear this foundational history, which we're about to unpack, we would strongly encourage you to go out and purchase this book and support the author.
Our mission today is to introduce the central theme of this incredibly well-researched work, the epic struggle to control black education in America.
And it's a fight that began, right in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War.
And it continues, really, right up to the present day.
And the author makes this really striking claim right at the start. She insists this was never just some, localized argument over curricula.
No, not at all.
She stresses that this battle for the black mind was, and I'm quoting here, a battle for the nation's moral conscience. That's a powerful way to frame it.
That phrase is really the key to understanding this entire period. The context here is just it's everything.
Okay, so lay it out for us.
When the chains of bondage finally fell from 4 million formerly enslaved people, they were instantly elevated from property to potential citizens.
Right.
And their ability to think, to reason, to organize, to demand rights, the status of the black mind, that immediately became a matter of national security.
National security, that sounds high stakes.
It was incredibly high stakes. If you're building a new America, the educational path you put 4 million people on dictates everything.
It dictates whether they become, a compliant, unskilled labor force?
Exactly. Or a politically engaged class demanding land, demanding power, demanding a real say in their own lives.
So for the formerly enslaved, education was the way out.
It was their absolute North Star. It was the key tool guiding them toward true liberation, self-determination, and, political agency.
But for the dominant white society?
For them, an educated, critically thinking black population posed an existential threat.
A threat to what, specifically?
To the established racial hierarchy, to the Southern agricultural economy, and to the entire structure of what would become Jim Crow.
So the core tension we're unpacking is this question of what kind of education black Americans should receive.
Or if they should have any education at all. It rapidly became the most volatile political and economic issue of the post-war era.
It was liberation versus labor.
From the very beginning.
Okay, so let's start right at that beginning. It's 1865.
Right. The entire Southern infrastructure is it's devastated. And you have to understand something crucial here. Universal public education, as we think of it, simply did not exist anywhere in the South.
For anyone, not just for black people.
For anyone. Black or white, if you were from a wealthy family, you had private instruction. Everyone else was essentially starved of opportunity.
And into this massive, desperate educational vacuum steps the federal government.
With one of the most remarkable acts of Reconstruction,
the
creation of the Freedmen's Bureau.
And the author really emphasizes that this was so much more than just another government agency.
No, absolutely. It was the U.S. government's very first social safety net program. It was pioneering. You have to think. This predates everything we associate with modern government support.
Like Social Security, the GI Bill.
All of it. The New Deal. Its original mission was just massive. Oversee the transition of 4 million people from property to citizens. It covered everything from land disputes and food aid to, centrally, education.
And their efforts in education were immense.
Immense is the right word.
Oh.
The Bureau spent a staggering $5 million.
Wow. And what is that in today's money?
It's roughly equivalent to about $130 million in today's dollars. And with that money, they established over 1,000 black schools throughout the South.
1,000 schools.
That financial commitment was a total game changer. It laid the physical and institutional infrastructure for the public school system in the South as we know it today.
So in those early years, the quality of education was actually pretty good.
In many cases, black children were receiving a similar quality of education to white children in northern cities. And the result of this, the black illiteracy rate, which was estimated at 90% at the end of the war.
90%. Unbelievable.
But dropped to 70% in just 15 years. That rate of social uplift is historically just unprecedented.
But that progress, of course, was immediately met with conflict.
With ideological conflict, yes. And this brings us to the origins of the historically black colleges and universities, the HBCUs.
Which became these archetypes for two completely opposing visions of the black future.
Exactly. You see, these two warring ideas crystallized in the founding philosophies of two early institutions, Atlanta University and Hampton Institute.
Okay, let's start with Atlanta University. What was its vision?
Atlanta University was founded with the vision of a liberal arts education. The explicit goal was liberating black minds, opening up possibilities for autonomy, for political leadership, for critical thought.
The true tools of citizenship.
The true tools of citizenship. And it was genuinely rooted in black self-determination. Its origins lay in the freedom dreams of two formerly enslaved men, James Tate and Grandison B. Daniels.
And what did they do?
They secretly founded the first school for black children in Atlanta. When the institution was formally incorporated, its curriculum was demanding. It was classical.
What were they teaching?
Literature, Latin, Greek, history, algebra. The white president, a man named Edmund Asa Ware, operated under the strong conviction that black people had the same intellectual capacity as whites and deserved the highest level of education available.
So Atlanta University was focused on creating the scholar, the thinker, the leader.
Right. And then you have Hampton Institute, founded around the same time in Virginia.
And it represented a starkly different path.
A completely constrained trajectory. Hampton's philosophy was restrictive. Its vision was, by design, to keep black people in their place.
Oh, so...
By training them almost exclusively as manual laborers and servants. This was a direct response to white anxiety about black intellectual capability and political power.
But before we get into that restrictive model, the book anchors Hampton's physical history in this incredible act of defiance.
The story of Mary Smith Peake. Yes.
Her story is just foundational, isn't it?
It is, because it illustrates the deep, almost existential risk black people were willing to take for knowledge. You have to remember the context here.
This is after Nat Turner's rebellion.
Exactly. After Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831, Southern states passed these incredibly harsh laws that outlawed teaching any black person, enslaved or free, to read or write.
So doing so was a crime.
It was a crime punishable by heavy fines, imprisonment, or even death. To teach or to learn was a revolutionary, life-threatening act.
And Mary Smith Peake did it anyway.
She did. Moving through the town like an undercover agent, she secretly taught enslaved and free black students under a majestic oak tree near Fort Monroe, Virginia.
That's the famous Emancipation Oak.
That's the one. She gathered her first students on September 17, 1861, and her class quadrupled in size within a week.
And that radical secret classroom became the physical site of Hampton's beginnings.
Her little home, the Brown Cottage, became the first building on Hampton's campus. She was the first black teacher of record for a Freedmen's Bureau school. This was ground consecrated by those freedom dreams.
But that radical legacy was very quickly institutionalized in a different direction.
Yes, by the institution's first president, Samuel Chapman Armstrong. He's the architect of the Hampton idea.
And where did his philosophy come from? It didn't just appear out of nowhere.
No, it didn't. His history is very telling. His father, Richard Armstrong, had been a missionary in the Kingdom of Hawaii.
Okay.
And there, he implemented a curriculum for indigenous Hawaiian children based on Christianity, citizenship, and rigorous manual labor. It was explicitly designed to civilize them for a subservient role in the colonial economy.
So Samuel Armstrong he took that model and applied it to black Americans.
He applied the exact same vision, almost wholesale, to black Americans in the South.
So the Hampton idea was literally a colonial education model designed for control.
That's a perfect way to put it. It was explicitly about maintaining the racial hierarchy. The Hampton idea trained students for a life of service, reinforcing segregation and subservience.
And the school structure reflected that.
It did. It mirrored the power dynamics of the post-Civil War South, an all-white faculty instructing an all-black student body.
And let's be really clear about what that curriculum communicated. What were they learning day to day?
They learned practical trades, carpentry, blacksmithing, farming. The women learned domestic sciences.
And the implicit message of that was
that black success was defined solely by your utility to white America. The liberal arts, the studies that encourage questioning, analysis, political participation, they weren't just omitted.
They were seen as dangerous.
They were actively seen as unnecessary, even dangerous. Armstrong genuinely believed he was providing the best possible education for a black person whom he viewed through a strictly paternalistic, racist lens. This was the powerful, restrictive system that would be in direct conflict with the dream of Atlanta University for decades.
So the ideological stage is perfectly set now.
Perfectly set. We have Atlanta University championing intellectual liberation and Hampton prioritizing labor and subservience.
And then we introduce Armstrong's most famous disciple.
Booker T. Washington.
His journey is one of history's great paradoxes, isn't it? From being born in chattel slavery to becoming the single most influential black man in America.
It's an incredible story. He graduated from Hampton in 1875, fully embraced the Hampton idea, and became its strongest, most eloquent advocate.
And his ideology hinged on this idea of black capitalism.
Yes, and the concept of earning respect. His premise was, on the surface, very simple. Black people must build economic power first.
Through
Through hard work, thrift, property ownership, and by doing that, they would eventually earn equality from white America.
He institutionalized this when he became president of the Tuskegee Institute.
In 1881, in Alabama, he solidified the Hampton-Tuskegee model into this massive, successful industrial campus.
But the real defining moment of his career, the moment that really launched this huge debate in the black community, was the Atlanta Compromise speech in 1895.
This speech was a political masterstroke. It was designed specifically to appease white power brokers north and south.
And it was historic just by happening.
It was the first public address by a black person to a racially mixed audience in the South. And Washington, who was a masterful public speaker, assured the majority white audience that the South would rebuild and prosper through racial cooperation and compromise.
And that black Americans would not agitate for social equality.
Exactly. And this is where he gives that famous analogy of the hand and the fingers, the quote that soothed so many white fears.
Right. What was the exact quote?
He declared, "In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress."
Wow. And that message must have been an enormous relief to white industrialists and Southern segregationists.
It was everything they wanted to hear. It was a promise of economic stability without the threat of black political organizing or demands for integrated social life.
So by promising that black people would focus only on economic progress, not civil rights, he positioned himself as the acceptable black leader.
He became the official power broker for the race in the eyes of the white establishment.
But that compromise came at a staggering political cost.
A staggering cost. The author notes that many black attendees were left dizzy from dread and utter dismay, watching one of their own so eloquently promise to slow down the fight for full citizenship.
But that compromise opened the financial floodgates.
It did. And that introduces the true systemic structure of control, the Tuskegee machine.
I think we really need to define the Tuskegee machine in detail. This wasn't just Washington School, was it?
No, it was far larger and more insidious. It was born during the Gilded Age, which created these ultra-wealthy industrialists, the so-called robber barons, who needed a massive, cheap workforce.
Right, to fuel their empires.
And they saw black education not as moral charity, but as an explicit economic investment to maintain a reliable, subservient labor class.
So this machine was this decentralized network of powerful northern industrialists all working toward one goal.
One singular shared goal, controlling black education to maximize profits and stabilize the racial hierarchy. It was an ideology supported by vast amounts of capital.
A meticulously crafted action plan to systematically exclude black people from full citizenship.
By limiting their intellectual and political development. These funders essentially became the permanent gatekeepers for all educational resources destined for the Black South.
So how did they enforce that control? What was the financial fine print?
The fine print was everything. Take the John F. Slater Fund, established in 1882 with $1 million.
Okay.
The enforcement mechanism was absolute. These funds only supported schools that adhered strictly to the Hampton-Tuskegee industrial model.
So if a school dared to teach Latin or political theory,
they received zero funding. And look at who was on the board. Former U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes and a former Confederate, J.L.M. Curry. Their presence signaled that this money was about solidifying segregation, not empowerment.
So it wasn't enough to just fund Tuskegee. They had to starve the competition.
Precisely. And they had a very effective marketing strategy. A wealthy Philadelphia tycoon named Robert C. Ogden funded these lavish annual Ogden train tours.
The Ogden train, what was that?
These were all expenses paid trips that courted elites like John D. Rockefeller Jr., bringing them south to witness the Negro problem firsthand.
And they were sold on the industrial education solution.
They were sold on it as the path to stability, proving that compliant black labor was an excellent economic asset.
And the Rockefellers, of course, institutionalized this vision on a massive scale.
On a massive scale. John D. Rockefeller Sr. and Jr. established the General Education Board, or GEB, in 1903. It started with $1 million, but quickly grew to over $43 million.
And what did the GEB do with all that money?
In total, The GEB spent $60 million on black education. But the crucial mechanism here was how it was spent. The GEB used its vast resources to incentivize state and local school boards to adopt and fund the industrial curriculum
Wow.
by matching state funds, but only for vocational programs.
So they were essentially paying state governments to enforce educational limitations.
Yes, cementing the model regardless of what local black communities actually wanted. It had long-lasting effects on school funding for decades.
And we can't ignore Andrew Carnegie in all this?
No, Carnegie put Washington on a completely different level personally. In 1903, he donated $600,000 to Tuskegee's endowment.
Which is a huge amount.
It is, but the critical part was the provision attached. It guaranteed Booker T. Washington and his wife a lifetime income.
So it wasn't just funding the school, it was financially insulating Washington himself.
Exactly. It cemented his status as the unchallenged black spokesperson for the machine's agenda.
This intense focus on economic utility over intellectual freedom, it leads us back to Carnegie's famous statement. He publicly criticized liberal education as moral dynamite. We need to unpack that.
Moral dynamite is such a powerful term of ideological control. Carnegie saw intellectual curiosity and critical thinking as inherently unstable. He thought it was capable of inciting rebellion among what he called subject races.
And subject races meant?
Non-Anglo-Saxons globally.
Yeah.
Black Americans, indigenous peoples, colonized populations around the world.
Because if a black student learns critical history, philosophy, political theory, they start asking questions.
They start asking, why am I subservient? Why do I lack agency? And that question destroys the economic model that's based on cheap labor.
Education for freedom dismantles the labor hierarchy.
And it threatens the entire political order. And what's more, the author details that the Tuskegee machine's influence wasn't just confined to the American South. It had global ambitions.
What do you mean?
The machine collaborated with the German government to establish Tuskegee-inspired agricultural schools in its colony, Togo, in West Africa.
So the American model of racial domination through education was literally exported to facilitate German colonialism.
Yes. They used African Americans to civilize, which really means to condition Africans for colonial labor and cotton production. This showed that the Hampton-Tuskegee model was viewed by industrialists as a scalable international instrument of racial and class domination.
Designed to create excellent workers.
But never autonomous citizens or thinkers.
So the Tuskegee machine was this well-funded, globally ambitious project. But the fiercest resistance came from within the black community itself?
Yes, and it was embodied by the singular intellectual figure of W.E.B. Du Bois.
Du Bois was the true champion of the liberal arts.
Absolutely. He had degrees from Fisk, a PhD from Harvard, doctoral studies in Berlin. He was the most highly educated black American of his time.
And yet
no white university would hire him. He was relegated to black colleges in the South, struggling to find a place in the American intellectual mainstream.
And he was the complete intellectual antithesis of Washington's pragmatism.
Completely. Du Bois believed passionately in cultivating the whole person, the imagination, principles, and most importantly, critical thinking.
And he had that famous question that really captures the divide between them.
Yes. Is a school meant to make men into carpenters, or is it supposed to make carpenters into men?
That's it right there.
For Du Bois, industrial education was a mechanism that limited imagination and political potential. He argued you can't have true economic progress if you sacrifice the intellectual and civic soul.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second. If you were a formerly enslaved person facing crushing poverty and immediate white violence, wasn't Washington's emphasis on immediate economic stability and trade skills? Wasn't that the most pragmatic choice?
That is the core defense of the Washingtonian approach, and it's a powerful one. Is why he had significant support among the black middle class, who desperately valued stability.
But Du Bois saw that as a trap.
A long-term trap. He argued that accepting subservience, even temporarily, created a false consciousness that would be impossible to undo later. The minute you concede your political rights and intellectual freedom, you lose the leverage to ever demand them back.
And that simmering tension just exploded in 1903.
With the publication of Du Bois' masterpiece, The Souls of Black Folk.
The book was seismic.
It was an international sensation. And the chapter of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others was a direct challenge to Washington's entire program.
He exposed the false consciousness of the Tuskegee machine.
He did. He argued Washington had sold out black political rights, The fight for voting, for full equality, for an economic promise that was deeply flawed because it entirely accommodated Jim Crow's systematic violence.
He essentially accused Washington of promoting propaganda.
He did. He argued that if reconciliation with the South meant industrial slavery and civic death, then black people were called upon by every consideration of patriotism and loyalty to oppose such a course.
That is a declaration of intellectual war.
A total declaration of war. And as a result, Du Bois instantly became the machine's #1 target. And Washington and his backers, they didn't rely on public debate.
No, they used surveillance and financial control.
Exactly. To maintain this narrative of black unity behind the industrial model, biographers have since confirmed that Washington secretly used machine money to fund espionage.
Espionage.
He paid private detectives to monitor and gather intelligence on his critics, like Trotter and Du Bois. And crucially, he controlled the black press.
How did he do that?
For instance, when the New York Age, a very influential black-owned newspaper, faced financial trouble, Washington discreetly purchased partial ownership by bailing out the editor.
So he had leverage.
He had total leverage. It allowed him to dictate editorial content, suppress negative stories about Tuskegee, and ensure that the machine's agenda was presented as the unified view of the race.
Creating this powerful illusion that Washington was universally supported, even as dissent was growing.
And that dissent erupted publicly in the Boston riot of July 1903.
This was led by William Monroe Trotter.
Yes, the black Bostonian who launched the Guardian newspaper to fiercely advocate against Washington's gradualism.
So what happened at the riot?
Washington was set to deliver the keynote at the Colored Business League's annual meeting in Boston. And when he was introduced, disgruntled black elite attendees met him with hisses, catcalls, and cries to put him out.
Wow.
Trotter and his allies distributed flyers detailing Washington's complicity with white capital. The situation escalated. A staunch Washington supporter called in the Boston police, and they arrived with clubs.
Oh, my goodness.
They started beating the protesters and arrested Trotter and his allies. Washington and his allies immediately seized on the chaos, blaming Du Bois and Trotter for inciting violence.
And this intellectual battle started to trickle down to the students at Tuskegee themselves.
Yes, it gave them the language to articulate their deep-seated dissatisfaction with the industrial model.
They felt like they were in a glorified labor camp.
That was the phrase used. These students, whose families had sacrificed everything, arrived at Tuskegee and felt the overwhelming focus on manual labor and discipline was just preparation for Jim Crow's subservience, not education for freedom.
What were the specifics of their complaints?
They complained that academic course hours were drastically reduced to prioritize labor in the school's industries, which, by the way, also generated revenue for the school. One student wrote this detailed 7-page letter lamenting the excessive focus on rules and punishment over intellectual development.
And the numbers bore this out, didn't they? The dropout rates.
They did. In the first decade of the 1900s, Tuskegee averaged only a 10% graduation rate. Most students were just voting with their feet and leaving.
They realized they were being trained to be excellent laborers, not autonomous thinkers.
And that reality makes Washington's personal choices for his own family look, well, profoundly hypocritical.
The double standard is impossible to ignore.
It is. While he's promoting industrial education as the only appropriate path for the black masses, he sent his own daughter, Portia, to Wellesley College and Bradford Academy in Massachusetts.
For a liberal arts education.
The very liberal arts education that he claimed was dangerous or premature for the rest of his race. His actions revealed what he truly valued for his own family.
So while Washington and Du Bois are having this epic battle, the actual work of building schools and resisting the machine is often falling to black women.
Yes, black women educators on the ground. And they were facing this hostile landscape of gender, class, color politics, and the relentless financial warfare from the Tuskegee machine.
These women were institution builders. Let's start with Lucy Craft Laney, one of Atlanta University's first graduates.
Laney's story in Augusta, Georgia, is one of just relentless hope against impossible odds. She's dissatisfied with the segregated public system, so she opened her own school, the Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute, in 1883.
In a church basement.
In a church basement with 5 students. Her motto was, Dum Spiro Spero, while I breathe, I hope.
And her curriculum refused to be constrained by the industrial mandate.
It was revolutionary because it was balanced. It embodied her motto, heads, hands, hearts. She offered a true blend of rigorous liberal arts.
Including what?
Latin, Greek, sociology, literature, and crucially, the study of African American history, alongside vocational training. She wanted graduates who were intellectually, practically, and morally strong.
But because she prioritized heads, she immediately became a target.
A target of the Tuskegee Machine's financial warfare, yes. Her local rival, Reverend Charles T. Walker, was an ardent Washington ally.
And he actively worked to sabotage her.
He did. He steered major donations away from Haynes Institute toward his own school, which stuck to the industrial model. Laney was forced to write directly to Du Bois, detailing how Washington had personally blackballed her from securing major gifts, including a potential endowment from Carnegie.
So despite her success, she was perpetually starved of the capital she needed to survive.
That is the structural takeaway. The machine ensured that even the most successful black institutions remained in constant financial precarity. Lucy Craft Laney died exhausted, and because no major donor ever fully endowed Haynes, the school soon passed away with her.
Which proves that hope and moral support couldn't overcome that centralized financial control.
It couldn't.
Another powerful woman who trained under Laney was Mary McLeod Bethune.
Mary McLeod Bethune was a tour de force. She opened the Daytona Normal and Industrial Institute for Negro Girls in Florida in 1904 with just $1.50 in her purse.
$1.50.
But her location choice was a stroke of strategic genius. Daytona was a winter haven for ultra-wealthy white northern snowbirds.
So she positioned herself to court donors who were already relaxed and receptive.
Exactly. She was a master of building relationships. She was famous for using her legendary sweet potato pies, which she brought to country clubs, and using her talented choir to perform for potential benefactors.
And she also identified a critical need in the community.
She did. She built a black nursing school and hospital directly on campus, filling a health void that was intentionally created by white exclusion in the region.
But despite all her success and her powerful connections, the tragic irony is that her school, too, remained perpetually precarious.
That's the structural cruelty of the era. Bethune had billionaires like Carnegie and the Rockefellers in her corner, but they would only provide operational funds.
Not an endowment, not long-term stability.
Never an endowment. So while white institutions were focused on expansion, Bethune was constantly forced to scramble and scrape to survive. It kept her dependent on the annual whims of white donors.
And then there's Charlotte Hawkins Brown in North Carolina.
She founded the Palmer Memorial Institute in 1902. She was only 19 and started in a dilapidated shack.
Her first strategic move was in the name of the school itself.
Yes, she named it after her deceased white mentor, Alice Freeman Palmer, to gain legitimacy and open fundraising doors. But her real institutional breakthrough came when she met a philanthropist named Galen L. Stone.
What made him different from the typical machine donor?
Stone was revolutionary because he asked her, "What do you want to do?"
He gave her freedom.
He granted her trust and intellectual freedom. And this allowed Brown to transform Palmer Memorial into a prestigious finishing school with high academic and cultural aspirations. It elevated the aspirations of black girls beyond mere manual labor.
So it's clear the work of these women and broader racial progress wasn't about individualism, it was about collective power.
Absolutely. Following the Niagara Movement, the multiracial NAACP was founded in 1909 to demand full equality now.
And black women created their own powerhouse collective.
The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, or NACWC. Their motto, "Lifting as we climb," just perfectly embodied the ethos of racial uplift.
And they were led by giants like Mary Church Terrell and Ida B. Wells.
Yes, and they fiercely confronted those damaging stereotypes of black women, the mammies or vixens, and they prioritized universal education and suffrage.
And on the ground, the Black Teachers Associations were providing this alternative intellectual network.
That network started forming as early as 1903. It was vital. It allowed local black educators to share pedagogy, teaching strategies, and crucially, teaching materials about black history and literature that were intentionally absent from the white-approved curricula. It was an infrastructure of knowledge sharing.
So as the century turns, the war on black minds becomes less about one man's charisma
And more about institutional force. Sociology enters the scene, and philanthropy shift to what they called scientific giving.
which is this idea of weaponizing data to make outcomes seem objective.
That's exactly right. They realized that using statistics could justify their funding decisions, making systemic exclusion look neutral and unavoidable rather than just racist.
Right.
The social sciences were deployed to rationalize racism.
Which is a striking contrast because black academics like Du Bois were using sociology for liberation.
A total contrast. You had Du Bois, Anna Julia Cooper, E. Franklin Frazier. They were focused on emancipatory sociology, asking what's wrong with the system.
Right.
Du Bois's The Philadelphia Negro used rigorous statistical analysis to prove that black challenges stemmed not from some inherent deficiency, but from systematic exclusion and discriminatory policies.
They use science to expose injustice.
But on the other side, sociology was intentionally weaponized.
Yeah.
And this is where we meet the evil genius, Thomas Jesse Jones.
Who was he?
Jones was a Columbia sociology PhD trained under Franklin Giddings, a prominent figure who blended social Darwinism with statistics to rank races by evolutionary advancement.
So he used science to confirm his racist worldview.
Yes. He joined the all-white faculty at Hampton, convinced that black people required a different kind of education, one that would condition them to accept their status as second-class citizens. His goal was to shape education to promote racial subservience.
And his work culminated in this official blueprint for the underdevelopment of black education.
The Negro Education Study of 1917. This was a colossal 5-year project funded by the Phelps-Stokes Fund. Jones personally visited 790 black private schools.
And the crucial part is that this was published as an official U.S. Bureau of Education document.
That official imprimatur gave it immense gravitas and an air of impartiality. It seemed like objective, scientific fact validated by the government, even though its findings were predetermined.
So it served to validate the industrial model and defund the liberal arts schools?
Exactly. It was a definitive who's who directory, a funding kill list for white donors. Jones explicitly recommended funneling black students only into manual training in household arts, steering them away from intellectual pursuits.
And his conclusion was that out of nearly 100 HBCUs claiming college status, he deemed only 3 worthy of the title.
Only 3. The study officially cemented the narrative that black progress required white management. And his influence didn't stop there. He exported these methods to colonial Africa, South Africa, Kenya, Rhodesia, to help European colonial officials justify underfunding black education abroad.
Just a chilling global reach of this ideology.
It truly was.
So after Booker T. Washington's death in 1915, the machine continues.
It does, now institutionalized through figures like Jones and the philanthropies, but black political thought was unified at the Amenia Conference in 1916.
And the purpose of that conference was to foster a truce among the fractured black leaders.
It was a crucial recognition that, as the author puts it, the pursuit of being right and winning had blinded them from the original goal of freedom, equality, and full citizenship.
And that unity was essential because the fight was about to shift dramatically to the legal arena.
Right. And this is where we meet Charles Hamilton Houston, who truly began playing the legal long game. He adopted the Jamaican proverb that small axe fall big tree.
A small axe to fall a big tree. I like that.
Houston became the dean of Howard Law School in 1930 with a revolutionary mission to train social engineers.
Lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and Oliver Hill.
Exactly. Civil rights lawyers committed to dismantling Jim Crow's legal foundation of separate but equal. Houston recognized that a big legal tree like Plessy v. Ferguson would only fall if its roots were meticulously weakened.
So the NAACP, under his direction, adopted this brilliant two-pronged strategy.
Prong one was equalization. They used Plessy against itself. If segregation was only legal if facilities were equal, then the NAACP would force the South to make them truly equal.
And they documented the grotesque inequities.
Meticulously. I mean, the financial disparity was often the most damning evidence. In the 30s and 40s, it was common for Southern states to spend 10 times more per pupil on white children than on black children.
10 times more.
Black schools were often dilapidated shacks with no heating, no running water, no textbooks. The NAACP strategy was that the cost of creating truly equal systems would be so financially overwhelming that the system would collapse under its own weight.
So you forced the state to bankrupt itself maintaining separation. That's genius.
And the second prong was the direct attack. This was the more aggressive philosophical challenge, targeting Plessy itself. They argued that segregation inherently violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, regardless of the facilities.
And what's remarkable here is the reversal of roles for social science. It was once used by Jones to enforce segregation.
And now it became the crucial tool for liberation in the courtroom.
Through the work of Drs. Kenneth and Mamie Clark.
2 brilliant black psychologists. They used the now famous doll test to demonstrate the profound psychological harm segregation inflicted on black children.
Can you just quickly describe the doll test for us?
They showed black children pairs of white and black dolls and asked them questions. When asked which doll is the good doll, the black children overwhelmingly pointed to the white doll. It showed that segregation had forced them to internalize these deeply negative self-images.
It demonstrated that segregation didn't just separate bodies, it poisoned the mind.
This evidence was strategically critical, particularly in a case called Briggs v. Elliott in South Carolina. After reviewing these findings, the white district judge took the groundbreaking stance that segregation was inherently unequal. That was a critical step.
But those legal challenges only happened because of the courage of people on the ground. The small axes.
We have to highlight the price paid by those grassroots resistors. Think of the Moton High School strike in Farmville, Virginia in 1951.
Tell us about that.
Moton High was designed for 150 students but housed 456. It lacked indoor plumbing. It was structurally unstable. A 16-year-old high school senior named Barbara Johns organized 400 black students to strike and march downtown, demanding a better school.
And the NAACP stepped in.
They did, but only on the condition that the students were willing to fight for full desegregation, not just a new segregated building.
And they agreed.
They agreed. And that strike became one of the foundational legal victories on the path to Brown. But the retaliation against those families was immediate and terrifying.
What happened to them?
Families who participated, like the Briggs family, they lost their jobs. They faced severe death threats. Their homes were burned. The Ku Klux Klan showed up at Moton High, burning crosses.
The cost was so high.
The cost was immense, but that relentless courage, strategy, and sacrifice culminated in 1954 with Brown v. Board of Education.
And that ruling declared that legally separate schools are necessarily unequal.
It rang a death knell to Jim Crow across all American life. It was the result of decades of coordinated, painstaking legal work, proving that Charles Hamilton Houston's vision had finally achieved its ultimate goal.
But while Brown was this massive legal victory, the struggle, of course, did not end in 1954.
No. Enforcement was immediately delayed or outright denied. It led to white violence and defiance.
We've all seen the haunting images of Ruby Bridges, the Little Rock Nine,
who had to be escorted by U.S. Marshals just to attend school. The struggle then shifted. In the 60s and 70s, black students organized to demand inclusive education.
which led to the establishment of Black Studies departments.
Exactly. Ensuring that curricula finally reflected black histories and contributions, countering that institutional erasure championed by Thomas Jesse Jones.
But today, the author argues, the battle for the black mind has taken a new, urgent form.
One that echoes the historical strategy of the Tuskegee machine. The author draws a distinct connection between the machine's multi-decade playbook and contemporary political movements. The structure has just shifted from Gilded Age philanthropists to specific political agendas.
And the source material specifically discusses the goals of Project 2025. What's the connection the author draws?
The connection lies in institutional control and resource denial. The author views Project 2025 as a specific, coordinated blueprint aiming to dismantle federal oversight in education, specifically the Department of Education/public school funding and gut diversity, equity, and inclusion policies.
So instead of using private funds like Rockefeller's to enforce compliance, the modern mechanism involves defunding the public institutions that promote critical thought.
Precisely. The goal, according to the author's analysis, remains the same. Centralized gatekeeping to restrict the scope of knowledge taught in schools, ensuring that discussions of systemic racism and history are minimized or erased.
And we see this in the spread of stop woke laws and book banning.
Yes, targeting foundational black literature by Toni Morrison and James Baldwin. It's all aimed at erasing uncomfortable history and controlling the narrative, just as Jones tried to do a century ago. The battle for control over the soul of the nation is ongoing.
So given this long history, our ancestors have left us a clear playbook to fight back. Let's focus on those key, actionable lessons the author distilled for us.
These lessons are so essential for current organizing. Lesson number 3 is, demand equity. Gradual approaches don't work. Accommodation leads to betrayal, as we saw with the Atlanta Compromise.
You have to demand full equality and justice now.
Yes, rejecting any idea that your rights must be earned or contingent upon compliance.
And crucially, we have to match the endurance of the opposition. Lesson number 6, play the long game.
If the opposition, like Project 2025, has a long-term playbook, our counter-strategy has to be designed to last decades, too. The NAACP's effort leading to Brown took 25 years of coordinated strategic work. We have to build institutions that endure.
But that long game can feel overwhelming, which is why lesson number 7, play the short game, is so important.
Remember that the small axe falls the big tree. Focus on immediate, achievable actions within your personal capacity.
Like what?
Organizing locally, Teaching truthfully, writing, advocacy, supporting those on the front lines, every small, consistent chip away at the system matters. It builds into the collective strength you need for systemic change.
And thinking about Washington and the Black women founders, lesson number 8, all money ain't good money.
This is such a vital lesson today, given the immense influence of wealthy philanthropists and billionaires. We saw how the Tuskegee machine used philanthropic dollars to impose constraints.
So we have to be vigilant.
Fiercely vigilant. Vet your funders' agendas, set clear principles to avoid co-option, and ensure your values remain the priority.
And finally, the foundational lesson that fueled Mary Smith Peak under that oak tree. Lesson number 10, freedom dream.
Every single political and social movement begins with radical imagination. We have to clearly and unapologetically envision the world we want for ourselves and our children.
And then act on that vision.
Act on that vision, even if the world around you doesn't support it yet, just like Mary Smith Peak did. That original spirit of dreaming and building is the most powerful weapon against systems of control.
What an incredible legacy of educational excellence and resistance. The battle for the Black mind is clearly an ongoing war of ideas, a fight for autonomy, truth, and liberation, rooted in a complex history that demands our full attention.
Indeed. We have to recognize that the structures that confine generations past are still being used today. And our ancestors have given us the blueprint to survive and, ultimately, to thrive. The fight for Black education is truly the fight for America's soul.
Thank you so much for joining us for this extensive examination of such important source material. We ask that you subscribe and tell others about this podcast.
We also ask you to suggest in the comments books that you would like to hear covered in future episodes.
Thank you for subscribing and listening.